Mark Carney, Trudeau's money man, globalist, China's pal. Weeks in, he jets to Beijing, scores a $250 million loan from their state bank. 11 MPs tied to Beijing. Carney's crew says nothing, selling us out. Foreign cash, secret deals. Carney's Canada.
Yesterday, we learned that Paul Chiang, the controversial Liberal MP, had decided to bow out of the race. Now, this was after Mark Carney originally said that he had accepted his apology and that we're all just going to move on. I think this was one of the biggest mistakes that Mark Carney has made so far, because it allowed this to be a story for an entire weekend. It's been 5 or 6 days now since news came out. Well, you did some digging, Mario, and you shared the recently uncovered video of Paul Chiang saying the thing that we knew that he said. So here he is encouraging his supporters to find conservative candidate Joe Tay and turn him over basically to the Chinese gulags in order to receive a $1 million reward. Let's play that clip.
Most probably is, the Chinese community knows Joe Tay. Right now, he is wanted by the Chinese government, and there's a $1 million reward on his head. So they want, if you guys want to pick him up and take him to the Chinese consulate, you make him $1 million. I'm just joking, but there is a arrest warrant out for him from the government of China, and there is a reward for him.
So I guess it's funny, at least it was to the Liberals in attendance there, Mario. What do you make of this controversy?
I was shocked that it was on video. I thought it was maybe a conversation that was had. He was being interviewed by some sort of magazine. It was in an Asian print. I totally misunderstood the whole thing until I saw that video. At that point, you just have direct evidence. There's a criminal code 464. And I can't remember it verbatim, obviously, but it basically talks about you counseling someone to commit an offense, even though they didn't commit the offense, you could still be liable as though they committed it. And so it's important for Canadians to understand that concept. I cannot say, hey guys, let's kidnap Candice. Let's kidnap her. And whether bounty or not, me saying that and stating that, it would violate section 464 of the criminal code. And I think that is just fundamentally at its base. Let's just look at it at the most basic form. You're breaking the law. And, I've had several former RCMP officers, I've had several police officers comment on it. And because people are saying, oh no, this is BS, you don't know what you're talking about. No, like, this is it. Like, he is right. Like, it's literally right. It's right there. And it's one of those things you just simply cannot argue. Now, what blew my mind about the whole thing more than anything is the person he was talking about, Joe Tay. He's wanted for criticizing the Hong Kong government in his YouTube channel in Canada.
Right.
In Canada. And so you have these two choices you can choose from as a Liberal. Do I speak out against this? Do I use my diplomatic ties? Do I speak to Hong Kong and say, hey, are you guys able to reconsider this? Can we make these charges go away? Like, we have diplomatic relationships with you guys. We want to maintain them with you guys. This is someone who's, not only like a radio host and in the media, but he's also looking to be a political activist. Can we have this conversation? And instead he says, there's a bounty, go turn him in, kidnap him. Like, how is that even? And then Carney, to make things worse, says it was a mistake and he apologized for it. He doubled down on this. He doubled down on it. And I think that was probably one of the biggest mistakes he has done since being named leader of the Liberal Party.
Well, it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, to me, that's something that is unforgivable. Like, you're supporting someone who encouraged the crime and ultimately may end up being a criminal as a result of it.
It is unbelievable. I mean, like you said, this is evidence of him breaking the law. The fact that it even took 3 months for the media to find that clip, like, it's not like I agree. I assumed that he was speaking in Cantonese, and that the reason that it took so long is because these things circulate like in signal groups and in Chinese ethnic media. But the fact that he said it in English, that someone recorded, it's been floating around online, really, really remarkable. I did a radio interview the other day on iHeartRadio with Richard Surrett, and he said, what do you think that this points to about Mark Carney himself? Like, there's a lot of speculation online. I'll just leave it at speculation that maybe he himself has some untoward ties towards China. Like, why wouldn't he just come out and say, this guy has to go? He broke a law, it appears. We have free speech in Canada. And when you leave a communist country and you come to Canada, you get all of the same rights and protections of Canadians. You have this adversarial regime in China saying that they can just put people on a wanted list and collect a bounty, and that you can send them to the consulate and the Chinese will deal with them. I mean, this is in light of 4 Canadians recently getting executed in China on trumped up charges. So to me, you're absolutely right. And then even just the arrogance of Mark Carney. I'm going to play this clip. Here he is in Winnipeg, basically just telling reporters that it's a teachable moment. Remember, Justin Trudeau used to always say this. Anytime he'd get busted with a scandal, he would turn it around back on Canadians. Like, we didn't know that blackface was wrong. This is a learnable, teachable moment for all of us, right? Or like, yes, I groped that woman, but she experienced it differently. And this is a learnable moment about consent that we're all learning together. It's like, this doesn't fly, guys. But anyway, here's Mark Carney telling the press to just move on. It's over now, and let's all learn from the moment.
It appears the involvement of the RCMP forced candidate Paul Chiang to bow out of the race. Meanwhile, the Conservatives just removed their problematic candidate in Windsor within an hour of learning of issues of this individual. Why didn't you do the same with Chiang? And was this a teachable moment for you?
Mr. Chiang made his resignation, offered his resignation last night. I accepted it. As I said yesterday, his comments were deeply troubling and regrettable. We will move on with looking for a new candidate for Markham, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, just to pick up on something she mentioned, she talked about how a Conservative candidate got ousted an hour after the scandal broke. Interesting. I wanted to show this CTV headline. Conservative candidate booted after CTV News uncovered audio of joke about Justin Trudeau and the death penalty. So CTV is just kind of like openly going after Conservative candidates. And it's like, they're boasting about it. Like, look, we got this guy. The candidate himself, I think he was on a comedy podcast and he was joking about, as you can see there, obviously totally unacceptable in the political world, and probably not suitable to be a candidate. We're talking about Mark McKenzie, who was the Conservative candidate for Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore. But the context is that it was a comedy show and he was making an untoward joke. Compare that to the Liberal MP who was actually telling people, I mean, maybe he was kind of joking, but the topic itself is really serious because the Chinese government actually does have a bounty on this Conservative candidate's head. And I wanted to mention another candidate. This is some reporting from Juno News, my colleague Kian Bexty. Thomas Keeper, who was the Liberal candidate for Calgary Confederation. He has also stepped down and is no longer running after an explosive Juno News investigation where Kian exposed all kinds of insane allegations, like just totally disturbing things about this individual and his personal life. Juno News broke the news, exposed him, and within about, I would say about 48 hours later, he was no longer the candidate. So I think that's 3 candidates that have been removed. Interestingly, for both the Liberals, it took a couple of days for them to eventually do the right thing, whereas the Conservatives, to their credit, cut ties with this candidate almost immediately. What do you think? I mean, to me, I thought that we had kind of moved away from cancel culture and that it wasn't going to be the main story of this election. And yet every single topic that we've discussed on the show so far today, Mario, has been about cancel culture. So do you think this is just sort of accountability in the modern age and we're never going to get away from it? Or is this sort of like an example of cancel culture run amok?
I think there is hypersensitivity in some regards, and in others there aren't. So, if we look at Paul Chiang, he was doing, it looked to be some sort of oppressor. It looked very official. It doesn't look like he's on a comedy stage telling jokes to people. His scenario is not a hypothetical. It is real. Like, this bounty exists. We're going to basically, you could turn this person in, ha, 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 ha. But seriously, there's a reward for him. You could turn him in. And it's kind of like, wait a second, that's not very funny. Yet the Conservatives as you said, I didn't know he was on a comedy like podcast, and he had made that joke, as distasteful as it is, as I personally don't like it myself, within the hour. And that to me just shows the differences in leadership. And even just the way in that clip where he showed how Mark Carney answered the question, deflected. He simply
Mhm.
deflected, and he's just telling you what he said. He's not really answering or taking ownership at all. And this is typical. This is media training, and what I'll say is liberal training 101. Yes, as you recall yesterday, I said those comments were deplorable, and we're gonna seek a new candidate. Like, okay, but like we literally like, why didn't you let him go immediately? Why did it take you so long? Why did you back him? Like, did he broke a crime. Like, this is a serious issue. He
Mhm.
didn't answer any of that. There's no apologies. There's no, and this is exactly the difference in leadership where I think one is, and here's I think the difference. I actually had this conversation with someone this morning that with Justin Trudeau, he lies to you in such a nice, likable manner. He will smile. Hey guys, he will put on this show as his drama teacher. And he gets very animated and he talks to you, but we know he's lying, but he's a likable liar. Like he
Mhm.
just comes across so friendly. Pierre Polyev is a straight shooter. And it's almost as though there's certain Canadians that would prefer to be lied to with a smile. And, this is such a teachable moment. And we're going to find someone where Pierre Polyev will say, we let him go. And it was despicable and it's disgraceful. He's no longer with us. And, he probably would have been like, I made a mistake yesterday. And boom, you move on. That's a huge difference in leadership because I truly believe Canadians and myself, I like what you see is what you get. And I would prefer to have it given it to me straight without any sort of like, don't try to make it pretty. Don't try to just tell it to me like a straight shooter. And that's how I approach myself as well. On social media, how I talk to you is no different how I would talk to the King of England or how I would talk to anyone else in Canada. Like no one gets any sort of special privileges. And I think that is very important from a leader, where I think with Mark Carney, can you trust what he's telling you? And to me, the answer that I keep going back to is no. Because if you, in a perfect example, and you brought up China, and I want to go back to this real quickly. If you look at his ex post account, do a search for China. Not one tweet, not one word, not one criticism, not nothing about the Canadians that were killed in China with their death penalties, whatever the charges are, whatever they were, it doesn't matter. They were killed, no comment. The 100% tariff comes in on canola oil, no comment. Like there's just no comment, no comment, no comment about anything related to China. And you start looking in deeper, and he's talking about, in the past, he's actually talked about, moving away from the US dollar and, maybe having some sort of a hybrid system where the Chinese yuan is basically the main currency that we should probably be looking towards. And so, economically speaking, he is already looking at that and he wants to do as little as possible to not sever those ties. And he clearly wants to make a very, very close connection with China if he hasn't already. If you look at the Chinese election interference that has happened, and even the report, the reports that came out, the majority of the names in there, if not all, are liberal people, and it's all coming from the same state. You look at the donations that Justin Trudeau, even when he won his riding in 2015, I think it was, people were bussed into his riding. There's all these max donations. It's all Chinese descendants or Chinese based um, uh, or Chinese descendants that are now living in Canada. And so there's just a lot of really unusual red flags there. And so I really, yeah, I'm really not a fan when I connect all these little dots.
Well, it's so interesting because the main question of this election seems to be like who's going to stand up for Canada in the wake of Donald Trump, President Trump, and the threats. And it's like, what about China? Like, in what world is our closest friend and ally the country that shares the most in terms of values out of any country in the world that we've had this historical relationship with? In what world are they a bigger threat than the actual nefarious, aggressive regime that allegedly runs secret police stations in Canada. I played that clip of you last week talking about how Mark Carney wants the yuan to be the global reserve currency. I mean, that's terrifying to me. There was footage that emerged of Mark Carney saying that, actually trying to sell investors on China, saying that they have done an amazing job basically with their green transition. And, Mark Carney really is a zealot. He's an ideologue when it comes to net zero and the climate. I mean, the big news story today is that they've gotten rid of the carbon tax, but they haven't really. And then, whoops, Mark Carney let it slip that he wouldn't overturn Bill C-69, the no pipelines deal. So really, like, what's the difference between him and Trudeau? Not much. And I think that these ties and these connections to China are just so worrying and so concerning. I worry that Canadians don't really understand the issue or don't really care. Like, when it comes to anything with China, they
Mhm.
just don't really engage, and they don't see it in the same way as, Donald Trump is like the perfect villain. He's this animated character that the media has spent a decade demonizing, and I think to so many Canadians, he lives rent free in their minds, and they're constantly worried that he's going to destroy our country. And here we actually have evidence of him saying these kinds of things, that he wants Canada to become the 51st state. It was like the perfect storm, and we've allowed it to overtake our election. You were talking about how Canadians would prefer to be lied to by someone with a smile. One of the things about Mark Carney is that he's almost like straight from central casting. He looks like a prime minister. He sounds like a prime minister. Polls show that Canadians say he is their preferred prime minister. And it's almost like he's a Manchurian candidate. Like, where did he come from? Where is his money? Where did he make his money? Where are his investments? He's not telling us anything. He does have these weird ties to China. The fact that he refused to fire this candidate shows that he has some kind of a commitment or loyalty or something. And, maybe the media allows him to get away with it. I'm glad that there's citizen reporters out there like you, Mario, that is really connecting the dots out there, putting it all together. I'll leave the last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I think that there's definitely something else going on, and I think Canadians really need to start asking themselves that question, like, what could it possibly be? I don't have all the answers, but I do know what I know, and there are a lot of things that are very unusual, especially from a prime minister, especially given the events that have happened. You can only come to some sort of a conclusion that there is some sort of a tie that he is actually not disclosing, and I think disclosure has always been a major problem with Mark Carney because people have to keep in mind he was never an elected official. Like, he is not he's not a member of parliament. And when you're not a member of parliament, you do not have the same disclosure requirements. And that's why he was able to get away with some of the non-disclosures that he did not do, that Pierre Poilievre wants to close that loop, because it makes absolutely zero sense. And I just actually released a video this morning that talked about how, Mark Carney promised to build 500,000 homes a year, and the government's getting in the business of building homes. But I've never heard of a G7 country getting into that business, or a
It's
government getting.
communism. I mean, it's flat up, like straight up. Like, in what world do we believe a bureaucracy and government workers are going to be able to build homes in this country? It's so offensive. The fact that Canadians might fall for it is so outrageous. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, 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 and you're absolutely right, and the thing is like, and so I started thinking, and I was like, how, like, Canada can't do this. They just can't. So how would it work? And I started looking into it, and it'd be Brookfield. And Brookfield would make the most sense to do it because they are actually in multi-unit res. And if you dig in deeper, there are, conflicts that exist. And the fact that Mark Carney did not disclose exactly what went into the blind trust before he put it into the blind trust is the biggest red flag to me, because he very well knows he probably has $6 million plus in stock options alone in Brookfield. Like, how do I know he didn't have stocks or stock in Telsat or Telesat before they got the $2.4 billion from the Liberal government? The CEO of Telesat is one of his best friends. It's one of his close friends. His kids used to play soccer together. They're pictured there together. The week he gets announced as the lead economic advisor to basically babysit Chrystia Freeland, and oversee the economic, they get the $2.4 billion. And their stock, at that point, had been up almost 100. It went up almost 100% for, I think, the year 2024. It doubled in price. You're telling me that this guy that you're close friends with, that you definitely have some sort of inside knowledge because you're now the economic advisor of this task force, that you don't have oversight to the budget that is going to, or to the government that's basically going to give 2 point something billion dollars to your buddy. Like it's, but here's the thing, he's a private citizen. So he doesn't have to disclose that. Conflicts of
Right.
interest does not affect them. So in his case, and he will make the case of, "Well, I've done nothing wrong. I don't have to disclose anything," and he never did. And so what he did now is so he doesn't have to disclose his assets. He preemptively put it into a blind trust. That way, he never has to tell you what he had in the first place. So when he makes these decisions, and truthfully, like, and I think people should understand, like, I have a very, very strong business background. Like, and I mean, international management, corporate strategy, like you name it. Like, I know how to set up, basically, if I wanted to, I wouldn't touch it because it's not worth it for me. But yeah, setting up a tax haven is not hard. Setting up transfer pricing the way Brookfield does it is not, I know how to do these things. And when you understand international and corporate finance at the level that I do, you know how he's going to do it, and you know how he's able to get away with it, and you know how the tax evasion system can legally work. But when the average person does it, you get the cuffs. When a large corporation and someone like Mark Carney does it, at best you will get a slap in the wrist, but on average you turn the other way. And I think that's probably the biggest issue, that I think also exists with him, is the lack of transparency. So I just really don't understand how he can get past the point to get Canadians' trust when he's been so opaque about his holdings, his dealings with China, and frankly a lot of other things. I think he's very, very conflicted.
Wow, there's just so much there to unpack, and it's so terrifying the fact that someone could be stepping in as prime minister, totally unelected, selected by maybe 100,000 liberal insiders, so we're told. And the entire ruse of being prime minister could just be like a money-making opportunity for him personally. Like all of the policies he's introducing, for all we know, could just be to line the coffers of the companies that he owns shares in that are in a blind trust that he set up without our knowledge. I don't think we've ever faced a situation like this, and it really is terrifying. Well, Mario, we got to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I encourage you to head on over and follow Mario. He's connecting the dots. He's a really good account to follow, very knowledgeable, as you could just tell from this interview. So, Mario, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you joining the show.
Thanks, Candice. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.